So what we do is we pick somewhere, whether it be over here or over here, that you know you'll be able to openly and clearly see from both setups, and we just put what's called a benchmark. Right? So if it's something permanent, maybe you put a center punch mark and you circle it, label it, whatever. Maybe it's not permanent, so you can just put a piece of masking tape up on a wall or a column or something. And then you get your partner through the viewfinder to look through. Let's say we're putting a piece of tape here on a wall. Right? So all you do is you just get your partner to hold a soapstone, a pencil, whatever, and just move it up and down. The person on the viewfinder tells you a little bit higher, 16th higher, or an inch higher, whatever it is to start, till you get to where their marking instrument is right bang on with the crosshair, right? Because that's where all your shots on the first side are going to be set up from. So let's say there's our benchmark, right? So we write it, our bench mark, right? So now we know if we do all these shots here, we go to all our, every 3 or 4 feet. We take all our shots as far as we can see through the viewfinder on the one side. We write them down on this list. Maybe it's up to E1 here. Okay, we write down all our elevations based on the grading pole, right? But now we have to get to the other side. So now how do we know what our setup's at? So again, we take our tripod, we set it up at the second location. We put the viewfinder back towards our benchmark, but now it's probably not, it's only happened once since I've been doing the tank in the yard. Once somebody set up the tripod in the second location and it was bang on. Like, wow, okay, that was cool, but probably not likely to happen. So you just set up, start looking through your viewfinder again. Again, have your partner, now maybe here, he puts it here. Or he puts it on the benchmark, and then your partner through the viewfinder says, no, the crosshairs. He's looking for his crosshairs that are in the lens, and they're below here. So he just keeps saying, go lower, go lower, go lower, lower. Okay, stop. All right, go back up a 16th. Okay, once he finds the location, now my pen or pencil or whatever is bang on the crosshairs. Then I make my mark. And then all I do is I take a tape measure and I measure the distance between the benchmark and my new setup with the crosshairs. Let's say it's, since we're using metric on this one, let's say it's 4.7 centimeters down, right? So that's what we're going to use for our corrected reading. So let's say over here we get a whole bunch of readings, 155, 155.3, 155.4, 155.3, 0.3, 0.2. Alright? So now we know which is our high and which is our low here. Remember our stick? The crosshair comes up or down, right? So the lower number is the high point, right? So this would be our high point here. So we'd have to do some shimming. We want to bring this up. If we bring the floor up, that means this stick is going to physically raise, which means the crosshairs are going to become on a lower number, aren't they? So the lower the number, the higher the elevation. The higher the number, the lower the elevation, right? Because it's going to be, as our crosshairs go up, this stick is moving down. So the higher the number, the lower the elevation. I know it's kind of counterintuitive, it's backwards, right? But then the lower the number, now the stick is moving up. So the crosshair is coming down the ruler, lower number, higher elevation, right? So this would be our high point, we'd have to shim these. But now we get to the second side, we got our second setup now. We've shot to our benchmark, and our new setup, the crosshair is 4.7 centimeters lower. Right, so now we have to add that number to the numbers we get over here, and those are our corrected readings. Right, so here's we set up number 2. Depending on whether we were higher or lower on the benchmark, that we add or subtract that number to get the corrected reading. So that way, if it's 4.7, all these locations on the other side would read maybe 159.3. But then we have to subtract the 4.7, right? So we do 159.3, subtract the 4.7, what do we get? You guys were doing math this morning. So 4, we got 155.3, 154.7. So that's our corrected reading. Because our physical setup on the second setup was just the elevation of the tripod itself was a little bit different, we went back to our benchmark. We found that the difference of our second setup from our first setup was 4.7, whether it's higher or lower depending on your measurements, right? You either subtract or add. In this case, we subtracted. Now, this was our physical reading, but our corrected reading to say, so we know it's all the same because we were at a second location, we used our benchmark, and we found the difference back to 154.7. So now, see that here originally, oh, wait a minute, it's way off. We did our corrected reading, we subtracted the 4.7, now we're closer to our first set of readings. Any questions about the benchmark?
It's 0.6, isn't it?
Is it 0.6?
Yeah.
Okay, so right, thank you. There you go. Alright. Any questions about that? Okay, so setup number 1, you'll take all your shots from what you can see, right? Then our back shot reading. Find out what the difference is, right? And then to just make sure we're on the right page and we're set up level again, then take some shots at some other spots that you've already done. In our case, when we're in the building, there's not going to be anything away. So you can still see some of the first shots from our second setup. Not all of them, but some of them. So just take a reading on 2 or 3 of the ones you've already shot, just to make sure you're level. Right? You find your benchmark difference, do your adding and subtracting, and see if you get the same elevation that you did the first set. That way you know you're set up level. Right? If they become different, your tripod is not level. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, so we shoot our first ones, we do our benchmark, and we check our back shot readings to make sure that, yeah, we're level, so we can continue on. If we're not level, level off your tripod. If our back shot readings don't calculate out the same, do it again, set up your tripod again, make sure you're level, do a couple of back shot readings again, 2 or 3 shots, make sure you're level, and then continue on. Then you get the rest of the ones that you couldn't see in the first time, right? We check the difference from our benchmark, add or subtract here. There's our corrected reading. Now we know all the elevations. Then I want you to put which one of these shots here is your high spot and which is your low spot. Okay? And then calculate the distance from each elevation below what you think is your high spot. That way, if we were going to level the whole area off, we'd know how much shim to put in the different locations to get the whole thing. Once you think you've got it, we'd reshoot the whole area and see if it's level. If not, adjust our shims accordingly. Right? You guys did it when we did the annular ring, and it worked out great. Right? It'll be much easier when we get a concrete pad poured out there. We'll just throw the annular ring down on the ground, sweep it off, throw it down, put it together, do it with a level, shoot it with a level, and it's going to be pretty bang on. Maybe a little bit here and there, a 16th, but you know, with that yard up there, some places we had like 3 inches of shims because just the quality of the yard, right? So, now just to go over the grading pole again, right? Just gonna fold this up and pass it around so you guys can have a quick look again. Doesn't matter what tape measure you're using, as long as you use the same one for all your shots. This one happens to be in metric, and I find metric to be a lot easier. But just to go over it again. Alright, so for instance, we'll look at the gradings on that pole between 155 centimeters and one 60 centimeters. So what there is there's a long line every 5 centimeters on this pole, right? So there's 5 centimeters in between there. So this would be 56, 57, 58, 59. No numbers physically printed on there because it would get really crowded, just like the blueprints you were looking at last week, right? Get all crowded with too many numbers, so we don't need to. So they just mark it every 5. 155, 160, 165, and so on, and vice versa on the way down. Then, not quite as long a mark, but that would be 56, 57, 58, 59. Those are centimeters. And then in between, there's another one, which is halfway between each centimeter, which is 5 millimeters. And then between each one of those is even shorter ones. So this would be 55, and then it'd be 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, and then this longer one is the 5 millimeters, and then 6 millimeters, 7 millimeters, 8 millimeters, 9 millimeters. The next one, which is 10, would be the 156, right? So for instance, if somebody's on the viewfinder, and you're looking through, and you see the crosshairs, and let's say the crosshair happens to be right there, through the viewfinder. One thing you gotta remember is the guy holding the grading pole, we have some little bubble vials that you can hold on there. It's gotta be plumb, right? If you're leaning back, the number changes. If you lean forward, the number changes. You lean sideways, the number changes, right? So it's gotta be plumb as possible. But again, the human eye sees 1/64 of an inch at a level, you're usually pretty close. If you're a bit shaky, get the level, get the little vial level that you can clip on the side, and it'll hold the stick plumb. But let's say the guy looking through the viewfinder sees the crosshair right there. So 155, the long one, 56, 57, right? It's less than, that's our halfway between centimeter mark, so that's 0.5. So let's say, what would that be then? So what would our reading be then? We got 155, 156, 157, and then 1, 2, 3 of the small ones. So 157, and then 0.3. So you call out the guy on the viewfinder. He's the one that knows where the crosshairs are. He can see it. The guy holding the stick can't. But the guy holding the stick is the one that can take the numbers down too. So maybe the guy holding the stick's got the notepad or this. So you call out 157.3. So let's say it was B1. Call it out, 157.3. So you just mark 157.3. Somebody have a question there? Oh, it's just coughing. Okay.
So that's for your number 1 setup then?
That's how you call out anything, right? So for instance, if we were on the first setup, sure. Yeah. So let's say we could see B1 from our first setup. The guy looking through the viewfinder sees the crosshair, right? Calls out the number, but he has to count, looking at the stick, what 2 big numbers is it between? Then which one of those, so 1, 2, okay, 157, and then the small ones are the decimals. Each one of these is 1/10 of a centimeter, right? So 157, and it's 3/10 or 0.3. If it was on the other side of this half mark, it would be 5, and then 6, 7, 8, 9, right? You just, whichever, and if it's in between those two, you know what? 1/2 millimeter, we're not building Swiss watches here, right? We're building industrial pieces of equipment. 1/2 millimeter is not gonna make a difference. So it's up to you, round up or round down, whatever you think it's closest to. 1/2 millimeter, we don't worry about, right? I mean, a grinder, a bulbing hammer, whatever, that's gonna take care of 1/2 millimeter, right? So who cares about that? All right, so what we'll do here is I'll get you to come up a couple at a time. Let's make a cross point over here, and Patrick, I'll get you to start for me. Let's say right on the corner of this blue square. So right on that front corner, and face that towards the builder's level. Oops, I got it upside down. There we go. There. All right, Adrian, come on up. we'll have a look through the viewfinder, and we'll see what we got. Alright, so what you wanna do, so remember guys, we talked about this, the one on the side here, that's the, see it slowly turning? That's the fine tuning. But that'd take, if I had to move 87 degrees, that'd take forever. So I'm gently, I don't wanna knock my tripod, I just gently turn, one way or the other. The peephole on the top, it's got a little triangular clear hole through it. All I wanna do is just eyeball towards where Patrick has the stick. Just eyeball, that's close enough. Now I can look through the viewfinder. I can start focusing. Stuck there. So there's our big focus on the side, and there's our fine-tuned focus. So sometimes it takes a little bit to get the focus in there until we can see. So I'm a little bit off, so I'm just going to slowly turn it. Okay, there we go. Now I see Patrick. Oh, and he's smiling.
Yeah.
Oh, and he's got a tooth missing. All right, go ahead, Adrian, have a look through. So now you can see Patrick, right? Okay, so now what you want to do is you can either use this one for the really big focus, and then you can use these two side ones here to turn left or right. So whichever way you think you got to turn, make sure that stick is upright, Patrick, as vertical as possible. Lean it a little to your right. There you go. Until you see the stick. Yeah, you see the stick? Okay, now what you can do is you can fine tune the focus with this one and the eyepiece. So the fine tuned focus is the one on the eyepiece. The big knob on the side is the one to get close to focus, because you can go from 10 feet to 500 feet. So you got a big focus range for that. Then when you get it into close to focus, into the distance away from your partner, then you can fine tune with the eyepiece. And just like binoculars, everybody's a little different. That's why you got to fine tune. So fine tune, Adrian, until you can see the stick, and then tell me what you got.
I don't see the crosshatch it patches really.
No, so fine tune until you see the crosshairs. So the one on the side are the turn, the fine tune is on the eyepiece itself. And then I'll get everybody to come up and have a look through the eyepiece so we know what we're looking at.
Kinda, yeah.
Did I set it up too high?
No. Good calf workout.
Alright, so if you're doing a bunch of work with this, you want to set it up to a comfortable height. You don't want to be standing on your tippy toes all day, but you also don't want to be bent over, all day. Just have it a comfortable height.
I still can't see the crosshatch.
Okay, let me see if I can help with the crosshair.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. There's the crosshairs. Now I'm gonna. There we go. Okay, see it back up. So what I did was I used the main focus to go a little bit closer, and then I fine-tuned with that again. Now you can see.
Gotcha.
So sometimes you have to play. That was a good example there. There's quite often you don't see the crosshairs, so just play with the two focuses. So what I did was I did the big focus, I just adjusted a little more until I saw the crosshairs, and then I fine-tuned for the eyepiece. So now can you see it?
Mm-hmm.
And what number do you get?
166.7.
Alright. Curtis, have a look and see what you get. Again, everybody's eye focus is a little bit different. If you have to readjust, just fine tune on the eyepiece now. We've got it good for the distance. Check for your fine tuning if it's a little out of focus for your own eyes.
I got 166.6.
166.6. Okay. Tom?
I'll throw a wrench in the mix. Problem solver here.
So 166.5?
Yeah, what's this?
Okay. Alright, so we got three different measurements here.
Extra points.
We're within 2 millimeters,
So slow.
but just see what you guys get. I'll have a look and I'll see where we're at.
66.6.
Remember guys, just be careful of the legs on the tripod, right? Normally you wouldn't have this many people walking around, but this is just a demonstration, right? Just be careful of the legs. We don't want to knock it on a level. We'd have to start again. So we could use the tripod base, because it's a slippery floor, we can't push those feet in. If it was outside, we can just push the feet into the ground and it won't move on you, okay? What did you get?
I got 166.7.
Okay, good.
Joe changed his answer to 0.6.
Yeah, 166.6.
So if you want to, go ahead and adjust the eyepiece, just gently, and you'll see how out of focus it can get and how clear it can get. And like I said, you can go from 10, 15 feet to 500 feet with this and get an accurate reading. That lens works really well, right? So the large lens on the right side of the body is the one for the big focus for distance, and the eyepiece adjustment is the fine tune, right, to get it really clear. 0.7, okay, we're looking pretty good then. All right, just everybody have a look through just so we know what we're looking at.
Oh, there you go. Thanks, Tyler.
Is that on the crosshairs there?
Forward to the right a little.
So remember the
My right or
large,
your right?
You're right. This way, your left.
you got your large lines, right?
Is that good?
So in this case, we have 165, because everybody said it's 166 point something. So the next large one would be 170, because it goes in large increments of 5. And then we've got 66, 67, 68, 69. Everybody said it's 66 point something. So there's 65, the next big line would be 166, and we're in here. 0.6 and 0.5 to 0.7. So the halfway mark is a little bit longer, and then you have 66.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4. The longer one is the 0.5, and then 0.6, 7, 8, 9. So we're looking right around this area here right now, 166.5 to 7. Yeah, 166.7. Right, and everybody's pretty good with the focus. Has anybody had to adjust it to see it themselves? That's good. So once you see where the crosshairs are, have a look and see where they're between. Right, so you can see it's between the 66 and the 67, even though there's no numbers of 66 and 67 on the ruler. Just have a look so you can see, oh, after 65, the next large line would be the 66. The next large line would be the 67, and it's somewhere in between there. And you count the number of small increments to see how many millimeters it is.
Is it still pretty good on the crosshairs there?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah? Everybody's hit 0.7 now? So who had the 0.6? Who was it that had the 0.6? Adrian or? Joe did? You had 0.6? So realistically, 1 millimeter?
5.6.
You know what? It's not that Joe was reading it wrong. It was probably that somebody, he had a breath on the post, or he moved his feet, whatever. So that's why I say, moving it left or right or back and forth actually does change the number, so you want to be as careful as possible. But realistically, 1 millimeter, are we worried about that? No. If you are, put the level on it. So I'll keep it up there for a second. No, don't take it apart. Keep it up. I just want to have a look and see if I'm on the same page. Okay? Okay, so we moved it, so I'm just going to turn the level slightly till I'm there, and I got 166.7. There you go. So the other thing, thanks.
Yeah.
The other thing that's on here that we didn't talk about yet, but on this middle base here, there's numbers. What do you think the numbers would be? 1 to 0 to what? 360, right? So now from this setup, depending on what you're doing, sometimes you might need to know where I was looking. Oh, wait a minute, I need to check that one where that nozzle's going over there again. And if I'd have written down my elevation, and it was also, there's a little pin at the back here, and it's on 110 degrees. So if I had turned and I checked all my elevations, oh, wait a minute, what was that one where the nozzle goes again? I just wanna check that again. Uh-oh, which one was it? Oh, it was at 110 degrees. So if I'm over here, making a reading at 34 degrees, now I wanna go back and double check something. Oh, what was that one with the nozzle, 110? I can turn this till this little pin is at 110. Oh, now I can double check that, or maybe something changed over there. Now I know where the location is. So 0 to 360, right, for circumferential measurements as well. All right. So again, just for the setup, we looked at the bubble. Right, here's the bubble, here's the center circle. Everybody had a look in the periscope mirror. We looked in 2 different directions, 90 degrees from each other, because you do one setup, might be perfect, but you turn it 90 degrees and that leg's out. Right, so you just want to be sure that it's level all the way around. So you have to turn it 90 degrees, look at the periscope mirror, and check your bubble. The screws are the ones on the base plate, are the ones that tip it forward and back, so having the bubble go up and down, and then the other 2 will do side to side, and that will get your bubble side to side. Okay, so any questions on what we did so far?
Sorry, the back shot reading, what exactly is that again?
The back shot? Okay, so again, we've got our tank, right, or our ring on the floor,
Yeah.
and here's our first setup. The red's not very good, I'll switch. Here's our first setup, right? Now we've got to set up somewhere else. So later this morning, we're gonna go over to the other building where we've got the predetermined locations to shoot our elevations. So your second setup may be over here.
Okay.
Now, we did our benchmark, and our second setup, we're gonna check and see where our crosshair is compared to our original benchmark. Because it doesn't matter what the elevation is of your tripod on your second setup. It doesn't matter, because it's really tough to get it perfectly the same elevation as the first setup, right? So the second setup, then we check and see physically, let's say our crosshair is here compared to our original setup benchmark. Now all we do is physically take a tape measure and measure how much higher now, in this case we're higher, I just chose higher. We just physically see how much higher our tripod is
Okay.
the second time.
Right.
And then we measure that distance, let's say it's 6.3 centimeters. That's what we're gonna use. We do our second set of readings from our setup, and that's what we're gonna use to adjust to our, what's called the corrected readings.
Right.
So, but just to make sure, now we're not worried about what you're talking about we're not worried about the benchmark for that. Now we're talking about back shooting. So back shooting, you set up your second setup, you adjust it till you think it's perfectly level, you check your benchmark to see the difference, but then, let's say you did 4 shots from your first setup. Go back and do 2 or 3 from your second setup, do your corrected reading with your adjusted reading from your benchmark, and see if you get the same readings, A, see with your corrected reading, if you get the exact same reading. Once you, in this case, add the 6.3 centimeters, if you get the second time around, you get the same numbers. That way you know that this is level, right? If you get, if you're 2 mils off here, 4 mils off here, and 7